one of the things that makes it a great sport. Turning to training philosophy, so both as an athlete and in relation to some of the coaching that I've done, I'm a believer of there's no one size fits all. Every athlete will have has got different physiology, they've got different goals, they've got a different training history. So I believe that you need to adapt a training program to suit the requirements and the training history of your athlete. If specificity for the event, I think that if you're training for it goes without saying, if you're training for 8 and 1500 metres, the training you're doing is very different to the training you're going to be doing for a marathon. But that said, there are some basic training principles which I think apply across a range of events. But nonetheless, I think specificity for the event is important. So just going out and doing 3x5Ks or a 15K tempo run, perfect for a marathon. It's very specific for the requirements of the event. If you're training an 800 runner, it's unlikely you'd ever need an 800 runner to go out and do a 15K tempo run. Just like if you're training an 800 runner, if it's an elite male, if you're getting them to do, let's say, 8 300s in 38, it's fantastic training with a 2 minute rest. Fantastic training for an 800 runner, but not going to help you much for a marathon. Gradual adaptation, a very important part of the training process. But it's also the gradual adaptation, which, because you should be able to, unless you're getting injured, from about age 16 to 26, you should gradually be able to do a little bit more training. And that also means, as long as you're absorbing your training, you should also gradually improve every year. Another thing which I always think, distance running is a fairly simple sport. It's not rocket science. A lot of people try to overcomplicate it. If nothing else, if you go out and just do a lot of running, you're going to get pretty fit. So there's as long as you're not doing the wrong training, I think there's you can't go wrong with a fairly simple program and doing it fairly consistently. And this might be for some of the younger athletes might be as relevant, but for the more senior athletes and certainly for the coaches, understand the concept of supercompensation. It's exercise physiology 101, and it should be textbook training 101, but it's phenomenal the number of athletes who, possibly coaches, but athletes who I know, and I've seen it time and time again, they either don't understand it or they're not confident enough to apply it. The principle of supercompensation is as simple as this. In order to improve, you need to provide a stimulus to the body which is greater than it's previously done before. So it's going to stimulate improvement so that you're going to be better than you've done before. Now, if you're not recovering enough, so your body will then compensate by the next time you stimulate the body with that way. The body will think I've done that before. So I'll compensate by adapting so that I can make that a bit easier for myself, because the body's probably inherently either efficient or lazy or both. So the body will compensate if you then give it the same stimulus again. So you then have to gradually, and it's the purpose of training, you gradually increase over a period of time the stimulus that you're giving so that the body continues to compensate. But if you don't then give the body sufficient time to recover, you're not going to be able to then gradually accept the stimulus and not only compensate but supercompensate, so get significantly better to where you are. So you need the basics of supercompensation: stimulate the body, allow it sufficient time to recover so it can absorb the stress that you've been given it, so that when it does recover, it's better than where it was. And then you repeat that cycle by increasing the stimulus, allowing it to recover, and going again. Now, if you're missing one of those elements, you're not going to benefit from supercompensation. So the first element is stress the body so it's doing more than it's done before. So that's training hard. If you're not training hard enough, you're not going to improve. A lot of athletes and a lot of coaches get that part right. They'll stimulate the training, make someone train hard enough so they'll get the training stimulus. But where I see time and time again, even guys at the elite level, they make the mistake, and maybe they're not confident enough to think that they go too hard on their easy days. So they're training hard, they do a really hard training run, and the next day should be a really easy recovery day, or somewhere in the cycle, a really easy recovery day, so that the body is fully absorbing the training you've done the day before, so you supercompensate. But quite often you get guys and girls who they'll train hard, and then their easy run, they'll smack it out, then they'll train hard, and they'll get through their easy run, and they'll smack it out. They're not supercompensating, so you need to have the recovery element. No, I can't stress that enough as part of a personal training philosophy. Let me say this though too, it comes back, no one size fits all. It varies between individuals, very, very much. I've been very fortunate in my career. I've become very good friends with and trained with a lot of very good athletes over the years. I trained with Steve Monaghetti throughout the early 80s. I moved from Ballarat to late 80s when Mono was one of the best in the world. When I moved to Canberra, trained with Deke for his last few years. I lived with Simon Doyle for a couple of years while he was second in the world while I was living with him. I spent a summer in Europe. Patrick Sang and I shared a house together in Switzerland, and we trained together. Patrick at the time was the Olympic silver medalist, a world champ silver medalist in the steeplechase, who at the event I was running. I did a summer training with Frank O'Mara in Ireland. He was then the world indoor two-time champion. I was very good friends with Paula Radcliffe, and I often did training with her at altitude in Albuquerque. So saw a lot of people do a lot of training. The thing, Radcliffe's training was unbelievable, and I couldn't do my easy runs with Paula because her easy runs were way too fast. But the thing was, even though her training runs were fast, she was able to absorb it. So that was one of her fantastic skills and attributes, I think, is you could throw the training at her and she could recover and improve. I know I needed to run really slowly on my recovery runs in order to absorb and improve. So that's part of the knowing yourself and be true to yourself. I know that, I knew if I ran fast on my easy days, I'd break down. Someone like Paula Radcliffe could run fast on her easy days and absorb it and improve. And as a quick aside, in Albuquerque, I remember running one day with my mate who was a 2:20 marathon runner. We ran with Paula and her husband in Albuquerque. Paula had never run a marathon. We went for a tempo run. My mate had run 2:20, lasted about 5 miles, and he got absolutely blown out of the water. We came back, and Paula was running her debut marathon about 6 weeks later. I said to my mate, there is not a hope in hell that girl can't break the world record. You cannot run that far, that fast, at altitude in a training run and not be able to break the world record, and she did. So I think that's another thing. You need to be able to train hard enough to be able to replicate and pull out what you're doing in some of your training sessions in a race. And I think the final one is and the jury's out on this. There's different styles by different coaches. My personal training philosophy, and it's only personal training philosophy, is an element of partial periodisation. I think it's more relevant the lower in distance you go. So what I mean by that, if you're an 8:15 runner, I think you need, my personal philosophy, I think you need to periodise more. Rich has got far more experience in middle distance coaching than me, so he'll speak on this later and tomorrow. So I think if my personal philosophy is, if you're training an 8:15 runner, or you are an 8:15 runner, I think you need to have blocks where you do quite a bit of relative blocks where you do a fair bit of volume, fair bit of strength speed, and then blocks where you then add more speed in. But also throughout the season, even if you're doing partial periodisation, through your volume phase, always do a bit of speed, and through your speed phase, always do a bit of volume. I think it's less relevant the further you go. If you're a marathon runner, I think you just need to do plain old. You can get away with almost doing the same program all year round, because the demands of the marathon event are almost strictly aerobic. So you just need a lot of high volume training and a lot of threshold work all year round as a marathon runner. So you don't need to do the phases where you need to do a lot of speed work. It's good to keep the speed work there, keep ticking over, but less need for periodisation. My training program over the years, it varied quite a bit depending on how old I was and the events I ran. However, it always had it generally had a similar structure, and that was as follows. Once I got to about age 21, I was running twice a day every day. Didn't start running twice a day till I was 21. I should add as a quick aside, I'm not encouraging people to get injured and have to do this. When I was age 21, I got osteitis pubis, so injury in the around the hip, and as a result of that, Jess is the physio, she can speak more of this, it flared up as soon as I did speed work. If I ran long, slow miles, it didn't flare up at all. So I had about 8 months where I couldn't do any speed work when I was 21 years of age. But in my career, because I just do long, slow mileage, I did long, slow mileage, and I built up to 160 k's a week as a 21-year-old, and did no speed work whatsoever in that period of time. I got an 8-month base I wouldn't have otherwise got, and that's part of the reason why I improved from 904 as a steeplechase as a 21-year-old to 839 as a 22-year-old. I made that improvement in one race. My first steeplechase out after having my osteitis pubis settling down after having 8 months of just basically base work, came out first race and got 25 seconds off my PB to qualify for the Commonwealth Games. So that was a program of purely doing base, but as I said, it wasn't planned, but you've got to adapt to the cards you get dealt, and the cards I got dealt at that stage were I could only run slow, so that's what I did. But my general training program was an easy run of depending how old I was, 6 k's when I was younger, 9 k's as I got older, as the morning run. Easy recovery run on a Monday. When I was 20, 21, that was 8 k's. By the time I was 25, 26, that was 16 k's. Tuesdays was often a shorter, faster session. If I was training for the track, that might have been on the track. If it wasn't, it might have been shorter reps through the trails. Wednesday run was longer. As a 20-year-old, that was probably 70 minutes. When I was training for marathons, it was 2 hours. Thursdays was generally fartleks or a hill session, and that was irrespective of what event I was training for, and often irrespective of what time of year. All that would change would be the type of hills I was doing. If I was in build-up phase or running marathons, it might have been a longer hill circuit. If I was running 1500s and steeplechase, it would be leading into training, and even during the season, eight by a 200-metre hill flat out. Fridays, again, an easy run. Saturdays would have been a race, longer reps or a tempo. So the longer reps for when I was training for steeplechase might have been 4 by 5 minutes. By the time I was training for a marathon, it might have been a 10-mile tempo. So again, the specificity. And Sundays were a long run. Interestingly, when I was running steeplechase, I'd chat to some of the other guys I was training with. I was doing more mileage than most other steeplechasers, even the best guys in the world. Because I was doing 2 hours 15 for my Sunday run as a 3,000 metre steeplechase runner. When I went to marathon, that was always 2:30 to 2:45. But that was just on my philosophy. I learned that volume seemed to work for me. And I do have a couple of training diaries. I've got one from 1996, one from 1995, and an up-and-coming one from 88 here with me if anyone wants to have a look. Happy to open those up to look at. So the principles follow. So as noted, gradual adaptation and over a period of time and specificity. Training principles I followed throughout my career, and which are often followed by many of the great athletes I trained with over periods of time. So Deep, Mona, Simon Doyle, Patrick Sang, all followed the same thing. And I need to say, when I moved to Ballarat as a 19-year-old, I was actually, Mona that year came 4th in the World Marathon Championships in Rome. Brilliant run. But so he was at the peak of his game when I moved to Ballarat. I thought when I got there, one of the best marathon runners in the world, I won't be able to keep up with him in training. I was relieved, and it was a great lesson for me as a 19, 20-year-old. Mona's sessions weren't that hard. He just did them consistently. His long runs weren't that hard. He just did them long, which is what my philosophy even as a 20-year-old was. And his recovery runs were bloody slow. He'd have, we'd have a Monday and Friday in Ballarat, do a a lap or two around Lake Wendouree, and there'd be a group of 20 people running along. I wouldn't be trying to burn anyone off. We'd be just jogging around at 4:20 per k, which if Mono running the marathon at 3 minute 5k race pace, so he's running a minute and 15 slower quite often than his race pace for his easy run. So it was reinforcing to think, okay, this is what some of the best guys in the world are doing. So the philosophy, which I soon learned and got reinforced by the great athletes I was exposed to over periods of time, sounds simple. When you run long on your long days, run fast on your speed session days, and run easy on your easy days. And even Patrick Sang, the Kenyan who I trained with for the summer, I was amazed how I do the runs with him, his easy runs, and I was famous in the distance running circles at the time for running slow, very slow on the easy days, as was Mono at one stage. Patrick Sang it was almost a shuffle. He'd go so slow. I couldn't believe how slow he'd run. We'd go to the track and do a hard session. A couple of times I'd go to the session, I couldn't keep up with him on the track session. He was running so quick on the track session, and he would also go out and run in season, hour 45 for his long runs. So again, that seems pretty simple philosophy. If you run long on your long days, fast on your fast days, easy on your easy days. But as I said, it's not rocket science, but it's a good basic, for me, I think, good basic philosophy.